thinking if there's so much that's going through my mind. Will I make it? Yes, I will. Our spirits are entwined. So let's get this show on the road. I'm here, I'll stay and I'll carry the load to bring it on with the Archie County Band. But hold on a second now, I'm starting to feel the strain. Was it a bicycle? What is wrong with my brain? Is it the end of me? No, I must still believe. So I'm still alive, you see. Heck yeah, now I'm on my way. But let's stay focused, there's still a job in hand that we must do. Cameras start to click, we know what create is something new. So go Marty and Sarah and Mark and Matt, Owen, Smitty, McGrilly and Jamie Lane in the Archie County Band. The Archie County Band. The Archie County Band. The Archie County Band. Stop the clock, we're done, we're rolling. Sound the horn and sing that we are going. 27 hours, that is the time. So let's hop on the bus and let it shine, 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 shine. Say sha la 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 la, 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 sha la 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 la. Good afternoon, folks. You are very welcome to Bandido Talks. Nicola, Nicola, Nicola. What have you been doing? I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, folks. We're going to talk all about Nicola Sturgeon on the show today. You know, she was with our mates, the BBC. Did you see that, folks? She did an interview, a tell-all interview with the BBC. And, you know, she was grilled on a whole bunch of questions about this recent scandal. You know, we have another political scandal, folks. You wouldn't believe it, would you? I mean, here we have Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister of Scotland. You know, folks, it doesn't get any bigger than that in the political world. You know, here on the show, we talk about climbing business dominance hierarchies, political dominance hierarchies. Folks, does it get any bigger than being First Minister of Scotland? That's like being President. You know, Nicola was there, former First Minister, with her party, the SNP. Now look, I'm not a political analyst, folks. I'm not going to sit here before you and claim that I know UK politics inside out. But you know, when we're calling a spade, I looked at this interview. I did watch a bit of it. You know, the story caught my attention. I saw it in the BBC. I was going down through the global news on the BBC's global news website, and I saw Nicola Sturgeon's head. I just saw her head and thought, there's a familiar face. Why is she in the news? And then, you know, it became apparent fairly quickly that there was a bit of a scandal. You know, her husband, Peter Murrell, if that's how you pronounce his name, you know, he has been, I believe, convicted. I'm almost sure he's been convicted. He's in court anyway. We can say that much. And why is he in court? Well, you see, Peter Murrell, who is, or perhaps I should use the past tense, should I, folks? Was Nicola Sturgeon's husband. Both of them worked in the SNP. They worked in the same political party. And of course, Nicola's now estranged from this man. I wonder why. She's now estranged from him. She wants nothing to do with old Pete anymore. Pete can go paddle his own canoe. And you know, what was Peter found guilty of? Well, I found out I learned a new word in the last few days, folks. Embezzling funds from the SNP party. So Peter Murrell, the former husband of former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, he was involved in embezzling almost £500,000 from the party. Embezzle. You know, it's a bit of a fancy word, folks, isn't it? It's far too fancy for the Bandido. Embezzle. Let me translate, folks. Peter Murrell stole almost £500,000, £400,000 from his own party to buy a whole bunch of stuff ranging from motorhomes to toilet seats and fuck knows what else. He stole a whole bunch of money. Embezzle. Embezzle. Why do we have to have so many synonyms, folks? Why so many synonyms? Why do we have to have all these words that mean the same thing, but they look fancier and they can be distracting, can't they? Embezzle. He stole 400 grand from the party. And of course, Peter Murrell was Nicola Sturgeon's husband. But Nicola's saying she didn't know anything about it. She was completely oblivious. I mean, she's just been caught up. Poor old me, poor old Nicola. She's just been caught up in the scandal. Collateral damage. You know, she was just the innocent partner and wife of Peter Murrell. And even though they lived in the same house, they worked in the same party, and Nicola Sturgeon was in charge of overseeing the finances of the party. She's the first fucking minister, but she didn't know. She has no responsibility whatsoever with regards to this scandal. She wants to absolve herself of responsibility. I mean, folks, how could Nicola Sturgeon be held accountable for the actions of her husband? Former husband! Let me correct myself. Former husband, and she's now estranged from him. Please remember that also. It has nothing to do with what has unraveled, of course. They just grew apart, folks. You know the way that happens in love? You know, people just drift apart. It just coincidentally happened to happen at around the time that old Pete there was embezzling all of this money from the party. Their love just drifted apart. You know, they just didn't see themselves as a couple anymore, husband and wife, till death do us apart. You know, the vows and all of that. No, they drifted apart, folks. Such is life. But you know, we're going to get into all this in the show this evening, this afternoon. What do you call? I mean, 22, it's coming up to 20 to 5. Do you call this the afternoon or the evening? Maybe it's the early evening. Maybe it's the afternoon. Who knows? But we're going to get into all of this, folks, because there's a good lesson, actually, in this story. You know, it's another political scandal. It's not the first. It will not be the last, of course. But we're going to go down through the BBC's coverage of this story. The BBC has a big, juicy article waiting for us all. We're not going to read the whole thing. We're just going to read a little bit of the article. For those of you who aren't familiar with the story, who the fuck is Nicola Sturgeon? Who's Peter Murrell? You know, all these names. Who are they? What has happened? We're going to read the article here, just so that we have a solid foundation. Solid foundation so that we can continue to analyse this. You can see the story, you can go read it in your own time. And then we're going to extract a lesson because, you know, folks, these political scandals, we're going to learn, actually. We're going to learn how to use what I'm going to call the lens of probability. That's what we're going to use in our show today. This tool that we have at our disposal, it's called, the Bandido calls it the lens of probability. So when we're trying to figure something out, you know, we are often presented with things in life that require us to try and decipher what is true and what is false. So take this story. We're going to use this story and we're going to practically apply the lens of probability, this strategy, in order to figure out what is likely to be true and what is likely to be false. Because, folks, we need to understand we can never fully verify if something is absolutely true or absolutely false, certainly in cases like this. You know, we don't have access to all of the details. We never will. The details will not be made public. We will only get the details from certain mainstream media outlets, from certain voices online. Nobody has the entire picture. Nobody knows exactly what has happened. Things are being covered up. Details are being omitted. Part truths are being told. And a few porky pies are probably being thrown in there as well. So, you know, it's very difficult, folks, when we're trying to analyse something like this, like a political scandal. We have to accept that we, as the peon public, we are never going to get access. We will never be granted access to the absolute unfiltered truth. You know, anybody who thinks that there's going to be some revolution among the people that's going to allow us to gain access to the unfiltered truth is a dipshit. That is not going to happen. We will never get the pure, raw, unfiltered truth. Never. So what we then have to do is we have to look at what is likely to be true, because we are never going to get the absolute, all-encompassing, concrete evidence to tell us what is right. So the best we can do is essentially figure out what is likely, what is probable. If we were to weigh everything up, what is most likely to be the truth? We could be wrong, because we don't have all the details at our disposal. So we could make mistakes, but this is the best we can do, folks. Certainly in an instance like this, and more broadly speaking in life. How often, folks, are we having to deal with problems and situations where we don't have all of the details? But we have to come to a conclusion in order to move forward. Well, we have to apply the lens of probability. This is what I do frequently. Whenever I've got a story like this, instead of me trying to dig down through the mantle, through the earth's crust, to try and figure out where the truth is hiding, fuck that. It's going to take too long. I only have a finite amount of time, energy, and attention on this earth, in this life. I'm not going to spend excessive amounts of time trying to figure out if Nicola Sturgeon is fucking telling the truth or not. I couldn't be arsed with that. So what I'll do is I'll use the lens of probability. This allows me to look at what is most likely to be true. And what we're going to try and figure out here is Nicola Sturgeon is saying that she has no responsibility for what has happened. She's trying to convince us that she didn't know her former husband, or at least husband at the time, was embezzling all of this money from her political party. She's trying to tell us that she didn't know. She was just an honest dipshit. An honest dipshit, folks. She lived in the same house with this person, worked in the same place as this person, the same political party. She is looking at the finances for the political party. She is having people within her own political party saying, you know, Nicola, things are looking a little funny there with the finances. You might want to look into it. But Nicola didn't know. An honest dipshit. That's what Nicola's trying to tell us. She was just manipulated. She was just deceived. She was betrayed by Peter Murrell. That's what she's trying to tell us. She's trying to absolve herself of responsibility and basically give us the impression that she didn't know anything about this £400,000. You know, isn't it just so easy, folks? It's so easy just to overlook 400,000 going missing, isn't it? You know, it fell out of the pocket of the SNP. Ah, Jesus, such things can happen. And she didn't know. So look, this is the question we are trying to answer here. We're trying to figure out, is Nicola Sturgeon actually telling us the truth? Did she really not know? Really? Now, if we understand that we're never going to get the raw, unfiltered truth, then what we need to do, for those of us who are interested in the story, what we would need to do is apply the lens of probability to this story and figure out what is likely to be true. So that's what we're going to do on the show. We're going to apply the lens of probability to figure out, is Nicola Sturgeon telling the truth? Is she likely? Is it probable that she's telling the truth? And her truth that she's telling us is she didn't know. She didn't know her husband was doing this. An honest, oblivious dipshit. That's what she's telling us. We're going to try and use the lens of probability to figure out if she's telling the truth. Okay, now let's have a look at the article itself. Again, we're not going to read all of this. We're just going to read a bit of it. So let's get over to our mates, the BBC. Now, we don't want that up. Hold on a second. That's me on YouTube Studio. Let me see if I can get this article. Hold on. Ah, gosh, folks, you know what, actually, YouTube Studio has been acting extremely strange for the last few days. I hope this show goes out the way it's supposed to go out, because I've been having awful trouble in the Creator Studio, trying to upload videos, trying to get in and manage my videos. I don't know what's been going on. The Bandido's under attack, is he? Or is it just a gremlin in the system? The Bandido knows all about technological gremlins here on the show. Go look at some of our early episodes. Holy fuck. Microphone problems and problems with the live stream. The Bandido had to learn on the fly. But anyway, let's see if this story's now up. Let me get this ready here. Is it up there yet? It doesn't look like it's there. Let me see. Let me see if I can get this. Where is this article? You know what? If I can't get this article up here, I'm just going to move on. We'll just talk about it. Is the article up yet? There it is! Perseverance, folks! 1 minute we're on YouTube Studio. The next minute, we're on a blank screen. But it looks like we have it now. I mean, how could you miss that face, folks? Have a look at that face. Let's have a good zoom in here. Look at this. Look at that face, folks. Isn't that just a trustworthy face right there? Folks, I have to tell you something. if you are interested in this story, I would really encourage you to go and watch the interview. Only if you're interested. I did watch the interview. Folks, tell me if I'm going mad. But I want you to look at her face. Look at Sturgeon's face. Even in this sort of screen grab. Is it just me? Or does she look like she's smirking? Does that look like a smirk? The beginnings of a grin? You know, whenever I was watching the interview, fuck me, folks. You see just body language. And again, I'm not a political analyst specialised in, divulging and breaking down political affairs. I'm not a specialised body language expert either. But I'm just telling you from my own perspective, from my own eyes, from my own observations, throughout the interview. And if you go and watch the interview, you tell me, let me know down in the comments if you actually agree with what I'm about to say. Throughout the interview, I am sure multiple times it looks like Nicola Sturgeon is smirking as she's being asked these questions. Now somebody might say, oh, but that's just her baseline. That's just her baseline. She kind of just has a wee smirky grin all the time. Well, you know what, folks? When I see someone getting questioned about embezzling of funds and having to present their case, and they look like they are smirking to me, that arouses a certain amount of suspicion in me. I don't know about you. I couldn't believe it. Literally, right throughout the interview, Sturgeon looked like she was beginning to smirk and grin as the questions were being asked. Should we just ignore our eyes, folks? I mean, has the human eye not went through a whole bunch of evolutionary processes to be able to pick up very important body language cues? Should we just ignore our eyes then? Just pretend that what we're actually seeing isn't reality? Should we do that? I mean, I thought Nicola had a cheeky little grin throughout the entire interview, but that's just me. Maybe I'm seeing something that isn't really there. Maybe the Bandido has some distorted filter on when he's trying to analyse poor old Nicola. Because it's just such a traumatic moment for Nicola. Being brought into this scandal with her husband. Former husband! Former husband. She's estranged. I'll keep reminding you of that throughout the show. Okay, so let's have a look here. Here's the title. Sturgeon tells the BBC, I'm serving a sentence for a crime I didn't commit. All right. And it says, I will not apologise for the crimes of my former husband, says Sturgeon. All right, let's read a bit of this, folks. Get a few of these details clear in our mind before we proceed. So we're going to start up here. Follow me on down. We'll just read a bit of this, folks. Hang with me. And then we'll come back around and figure out what the lesson is here. Okay, so Nicola Sturgeon has told the BBC she feels like she is, quote, serving a sentence for a crime I did not commit. Well, by the time we get to the end of the show, folks, we're going to use the lens of probability to figure out if this is likely to be true or not. After her estranged husband admitted embezzling £400,000 from the SNP, the party she led for years. In an exclusive interview with Laura Quessenberg, however the fuck you pronounce that, Laura, we're just going to call her, Scotland's former First Minister refused to apologise for the scandal and struggled to hold back tears. Very emotional, folks. Recalling gifts from Peter Murrell that turned out to have been purchased with stolen money. You see, they did use the word stolen. You see, the Bandido isn't off his rocker. Stolen money, embezzling. Who the fuck uses that word? Unless you are a politician. Who the fuck else uses that word? Embezzle. Oh yes, I went down to the supermarket and I embezzled some funds from the cash machine. Yeah, we call that stealing, folks. Anyway, Sturgeon told the BBC Quote, I am not responsible for the crimes that my former husband committed, and I'm not going to apologize for someone else's crimes. She has consistently denied any knowledge of Murrell's wrongdoing, committed between 2010 and 2022. Yes, that's correct, folks. 12 years. Nicola was just an oblivious, honest, wholesome dipshit. You know, it can just happen. 12 years you can be deceived. All right, so the former First Minister was not charged following a police investigation. So she wasn't charged. Her hands are clean, it would seem. Sturgeon was SNP party leader between 2014 and 2023, and in that role shared responsibility for monitoring the party's accounts. I mean, folks, that is a beautiful line right there, isn't it? It's just a beautiful line. Let's read that one out again. Sturgeon was SNP party leader between 2014 and 2023, the exact period that overlaps with her former estranged husband's stealing of the SNP's funds. And it gets better though, folks, because in that role, she shared responsibility for monitoring the party's accounts. Lord God, the money I just don't know where it went. 400,000, you know, it was like a leaky, you know, the way in parts of the Caribbean, folks. You know, whenever Jack is coming in to the dock, you know, in his little shitty, whatever it was, dinghy wooden boat. And you know where there's a bunch of holes in it and it starts to sink. You know, Nicola just couldn't see the holes in the SNP's accounts, even though she was sharing responsibility for overseeing. You know, you would think if you had such a role, you would be paying very diligent attention. You'd be very thorough to make sure that the party isn't leaking funds, just like Jack's boat. Because, you know, if you leak enough funds, you might sink. But no, she didn't notice anything between 2014 and 2023. Ah, gosh, she was just again, deceived, folks. Deception, a terrible thing, isn't it? Now, let's keep going. In the interview broadcast on Sunday past, Sturgeon said, quote, for my own sake, but for the sake of people out there, a lot of women who end up finding themselves blamed for the actions of the men in their lives. I'm not going to contribute to that kind of sense that I'm responsible for someone else's crimes. You see what Nicola's doing? She's standing up for the women. You know, the women who always get blamed? Because that's right. Women have precisely zero responsibility for anything. Isn't that right, folks? We talked about that last week. Remember, what the fuck was her name? Watkins. We were talking about that gal last week. Watkins, the one who got raped. Yeah, her. About how she was just a victim. And it had nothing to do with her. She didn't put herself in circumstances whereby she could easily be exploited. It's not as if, you know, she was sober, thinking clearly. There was no alcohol involved, nothing like that. You know, poor old Watkins there. I can't remember her first name. I'm just going to call her Watkins. Old Watkins last week. Of course, she had no responsibility either. Nothing. Zero. It was all somebody else's fault. You know, Nicola, something similar here, you know, she's not going to take responsibility for a man, for his actions. And she added, I will take responsibility for the things I do. Does that include overseeing the accounts and the funds of the SNP? Are you going to take responsibility for that? Interestingly, folks, later on in the interview, she doesn't take responsibility for that. The interviewer says, you know, okay, Peter Murrell, you know, okay, you don't want to take responsibility for his actions. Fair enough. But do you take responsibility for, you know, overseeing the accounts of the SNP party? What about any responsibility there, Nicola? No, I'm not. No, that's not my fault. I was betrayed and deceived. My trust, you know, my goodwill, my innocent dipshittedness, if there's such a word, folks, was just taken advantage of. What can you do? Now, she goes on to say, I will take responsibility for the things I do. the decisions I make, I'm sitting here with you right now, answering questions, because I believe strongly in that accountability. Well, do you now? It really sounds like it, I have to say. She continues, but I am not responsible for the crimes that my former husband committed, and I'm not going to apologize for someone else's crimes. You did choose him as a husband, didn't you, Nicola? Do you take responsibility for that? Nicola, do you take responsibility for choosing the man that you married? Or were you coerced into that too? Did he trick you into marrying him? Or, I mean, what's the story? You decided, I'm going to have to assume, you decided that I'm going to get into a relationship with this man. Do you take responsibility for that? Do you take responsibility for bringing that relationship into the workplace, into the SNP political party? Do you accept responsibility for that? Accountability? Because, you know, whether you like it or not, you decided to associate with this person. Of course, you're going to be judged by the people that you associate with. Fuck me. Of course, if you associate with drug dealers and rapists, you know, people might come to the logical conclusion that you yourself might be a drug dealer or a rapist. You know, let's imagine a fictional person here called Bob. Let's say Bob hangs out with drug dealers and rapists. Is it really unreasonable to say that, you know, Bob himself might be, we're not, you know, sentencing him to absolute, you know, life in prison here, but is it completely unreasonable to look at the people that Bob surrounds himself with, rapists and drug dealers, and is it totally unreasonable to say, well, there's a chance that Bob could be involved in either selling drugs, taking drugs, abusing women, sexually assaulting women? Is it beyond the realms of possibility to come to conclusions like that? I don't think so. I don't think that's a sign of madness to draw those sorts of conclusions from Bob's life and the people whom he is associating with. You know, does Nicola take responsibility for associating with Peter Murrell? For marrying him? For working with him? Any responsibility there? I'm not hearing much. Bit of a silence on the other end there. Anyway. It says Sturgeon's interview was met with skepticism for some and a demand for further investigation into the scandal. All right, so we're not going to read too much more of this, folks. You get the idea. Again, let's just read this bit here. This is great. Asked if she bore no responsibility at all, despite her role, Sturgeon told the BBC, no. You see, folks, asked if she bore no responsibility at all, despite her role, First Minister of Scotland, leader of the party, and overseeing the party's accounts, despite all of that being involved in her role, Sturgeon told the BBC, this is the BBC reporting, folks, no, Murrell perpetrated a crime on the SNP. By definition, that included me as the party leader. He misled, he deceived. But did you not hire this person? Did you not choose to associate with this person? Fuck me. Again, I'm going to go back to Bob, this fictional character. If Bob continues to associate with the rapists and the drug dealers, what other conclusion could we come to other than he's involved in some way in either consuming drugs or distributing drugs and engaging in unsavory behavior with women? How could we come to a conclusion other than that? So, does Bob hold no responsibility? Is Bob, no, I didn't commit a crime. Bob, I didn't commit a crime. I just associated. with all the rapists and the drug dealers. No crime. I mean, do we honestly think that we can't judge people by those that surround them? Is that not a good way? Is it not one good way to judge a person? Who do they associate with? I mean, I'm not saying it's the only way to judge a person, but I mean, of course, we are going to look at this person's inner orbit. Who do they talk to? Who do they do business with? Who are their closest confidants? That's going to tell us something important about the person. It won't tell us everything about them, but it's going to tell us something important. Yet here is Nicola telling us that she has zero responsibility. Zero. Like not even a bit. Not even a bit of responsibility for getting into a relationship with Peter Murrell. Not even a bit of responsibility for deciding to bring that relationship into the workplace. Deciding to work with Peter Murrell within the SNP. Not taking any responsibility for being partly responsible for overseeing the accounts of the party. Like, she's literally telling us zero. She has zero responsibility. Really? All right. Again, she repeats, quote, he is serving and will be serving a sentence for a crime he committed. I'm out here feeling as if I'm serving a sentence for a crime I did not commit. Well, poor you. We're all very sorry for you, Nicola. All right, look. That's the article, folks. Look, £400,000 worth of funds were stolen by Nicola Sturgeon, who was the first, let's just say first minister, the leader of the SNP at the time. Peter Murrell's activities were from 2010 to 2022. Nicola Sturgeon was first minister involved in the SNP from 2012 to 2023, I believe. Let's just go up and check that, because it was a golden nugget. There it is here. So, Murrell's wrongdoing committed between 2010 and 2022. Sturgeon was SNP party leader between 2014 and 2023. And she was First Minister of Scotland for a while as well. So, no responsibility. Anyway, there's the article, folks. You go read the article yourself. It's a big, long article. There it is up on screen. If you want more of the nitty-gritty details, Peter Murrell, Nicola Sturgeon's former husband, he was buying motorhomes, jewellery. I'm almost sure he was buying toilet seats, whatever the fuck he was doing that for. Anyway, I suppose we all need a toilet seat, folks. Maybe that's a show for a different day. Do we even need toilet seats? Who sits on the toilet? Like, who sits on the toilet? You should be squatting. Or at least trying to. I'm not saying you have to be yogi-level flexibility. But, just sitting on the toilet. But anyway, look, show for a different day, folks. But, you'd be able to read the article. You'd be able to see what Peter was spending all the money on. And you'd be able to just, again, you'd be able to read Nicola absolving herself of responsibility. I would encourage you to watch the interview. Again, I'm no body language expert, but she looked like she was grinning at times throughout the interview. She looked like she was smirking. That's just my anecdotal observations. But I'm a dipshit. Always remember that. Read the disclaimer at the start of the show. Bandido is a dipshit. So maybe my eye is just totally dysfunctional. Who knows? But when I was looking at the interview, she looked like she was grinning at some of the questions. She didn't look terribly upset to me. She didn't look grief-stricken. She didn't look stressed. That's not what I thought. But that's only my opinion, and I'm a dipshit. So anyway, let's get our main screen back up here. After all that. Okay, so let's get straight into the lesson here, folks. Is Nicola Sturgeon telling the truth? That's what we're trying to figure out here. Is Nicola Sturgeon telling the truth? Did she truly not know that her husband, Peter Murrell, between 2010 and 2022 was stealing a whole bunch of money from her party that she was the leader of, that she had responsibility for overseeing the accounts and funds of the party. Was she just oblivious to all this? Because she's mounting a case here, both through the article, in the interview, she's mounting her case that she has zero. She hasn't even taken a little bit of responsibility, literally zero responsibility for any of this. Despite her role as party leader, despite her overseeing the accounts of the party, despite her choosing Peter Murrell as a husband, despite her choosing to work with Peter Murrell in the party and bringing that relationship into the party, despite all of this, she just didn't know. For 12 years. Most of which she served as party leader. So that's her case. She's saying she didn't know. Okay. Is she telling the truth? Is the question. Now, as I said at the beginning, are we ever going to get the full access to all of the details of this story? No, we are not. These details will never be made available to us. We will only be drip-fed certain details. Many of the details will be omitted. Many of the details will be manipulated. So we will have this hodgepodge of part truths, part omissions, and part fabrications. So the point is, if we want to get to the absolute raw truth, what actually happened here, we would need all the details in front of us, which we are never going to have. So, if we accept that we are never going to be presented with the raw, unfiltered truth, then we have to change our angle of attack. Because you'll often hear people say, I have a hair on my mouth. You'll often hear people say, forget about the hair. See, this is the thing, folks. When you have long hair, it gets into places that it shouldn't get into. But look, we don't have access to the full truth. So there's no point in someone saying, we should be given the truth. The truth should be made available. Of course, it's not going to be made available. There's going to be a whole bunch of deception here. So if that's the case, if we cannot rely on all of the details that are being presented to us, all of the details that have been made available in the public sphere, we need to change our angle of analysis. We can't have our angle of analysis being, let's find the truth, and then let's analyze the truth and see what that tells us. We're never going to get the truth in its full, unfiltered form. So we need to change the angle of attack. Now, what's the point of the show, folks? The point of the show here is we are going to use an analytical tool that I call the lens of probability. So we're going to use the lens of probability to work out if Nicola is telling the truth or if she is lying. Now, when you use the lens of probability, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. When you use the lens of probability, what you're actually trying to figure out is what is likely to be the truth. You could be wrong, and there could be certainly parts of your conclusions that are wrong. And we have to be open and have enough humility to accept that when we use the lens of probability, we might get things wrong. However, if we're never going to get access to the full truth, and if it's going to take a colossal amount of time, energy, and attention to even get anywhere near it, we need to find a more efficient, practical means of figuring out stories and situations like this, so that we're not spending our whole fucking life, all of our waking hours, analysing Nicola Sturgeon and her situation. We need to find, we need to use a tool that helps us more or less get the broad details correct. Sure, we may get a few bits and pieces wrong, but as long as we are getting 80% of the picture clear, that's enough. That's enough for us to make a fairly well-informed decision. Remember, 80% in a test, folks, is an A. That's an A. 80% is an A. That's pretty good. That's all we need to get here. And that's what the lens of probability allows us to do. It allows us to get enough detail without getting lost in the weeds and without wasting a whole bunch of time, energy, and attention. So, let's now apply the lens of probability to Nicola Sturgeon's situation. And let us now use this tool in real time to figure out if she is likely to be telling the truth or if she is engaged in an act of deception and misdirection. Let's figure it out. Okay, so here's the way I'm going to use the lens of probability. Now, you might use it differently, but I'm going to give you a real-time demonstration of how I'm going to use it for this story. We've talked many times before, folks, on the show about dominance hierarchies, ascending dominance hierarchies. In this case, we are talking about a political dominance hierarchy. And what Nicola Sturgeon has done throughout her career, whether you like her or not, I want you to put your feelings about her politics to one side and just look at what she's done. Whether you like it or not, Nicola Sturgeon, by hook or by crook, however she's managed to do it, and we can speculate how, but she has managed to ascend a political dominance hierarchy and find herself right at the top of the dominance hierarchy. Folks, First Minister of Scotland. In the world of politics, it doesn't get any bigger than that. That's the equivalent of Prime Minister and fucking President and all the rest. So Nicola Sturgeon managed to not only ascend the political dominance hierarchy of her party, the SNP, that's a little sub-dominance hierarchy, but she also managed to ascend the nationwide political dominance hierarchy in Scotland to become the First Minister of Scotland. So, Nicola Sturgeon, whether you like it or not, however she's managed to do it, she has climbed to the top of a political dominance hierarchy. That we do know. That is a fact. That is us staring at the truth. Nobody can deny that. You may not like her, but you cannot deny that she has rose. She's risen up through the ranks and got herself at the top of her party's political dominance hierarchy and of the country, of Scotland's political dominance hierarchy. Okay, this is important, folks. We need to understand this in order to apply the lens of probability. So, here we have Nicola Sturgeon at the top of a political dominance hierarchy. Now, I'm going to draw an analogy, which I often like to do, with the natural world. We're going to look at the animal kingdom, and specifically, we are going to look at the food chain in the animal kingdom. Now, for those of you who enjoy your nature and enjoy your animals, what sits at the top of the food chain, excluding humans? So we're going to remove humans from this equation. I want you to think of an ancestral or even just a wild environment in the modern age. The Congo rainforest, the savannah out in Africa, the fucking Amazon rainforest, you name it. You know, the forests of India, any of these places. I want you to think of a wild natural environment, and I want you to think of the food chain in that wild natural environment. We're going to take humans out of the equation, and we're just going to look at the animal kingdom minus humans. Okay, so whether it's in the Congo rainforest, the savannah, the Amazon, the forests of India, we have what we call a food web or a food chain. Correct or not? So we have a food chain. We agree. What sits at the top of the food chain? There's a specific group of animals that sit at the top of the food chain. We have a specific name for them. Do you know what they're called? They are called apex predators. So at the top of any food chain, you have the apex predators. They are small in number, but they are at the top of the food chain. We all know this, folks. When you look at a food chain, the further you move down the food chain, the more abundant the creatures or the specific species get. So as you find yourself down at the base of a food chain, you've got a fuck ton of those animals, while closer to the top of the food chain, the relative number of animals decreases until you get to the top of the food chain, and up there you have the apex predators. Apex predators have no natural predator. They are at the top of the food chain. They sit at the top of what we're going to call the food chain dominance hierarchy. We're going to imagine the food chain like a dominance hierarchy, just like a political dominance hierarchy or a business dominance hierarchy. So the apex predators have ascended the food web, dominance hierarchy, and they now sit at the top of the food chain. Now, if you are an apex predator, what must you do? What is a prerequisite for being an apex predator? What is an unavoidable behavior that you must engage in to be classified as an apex predator at the top of a food chain? Let me tell you what it is. You need to kill and eat other animals. That's what apex predators do. They kill, they hunt, they kill, and they eat the flesh of other animals that sit lower in the food chain. If you want to be classified as an apex predator, you must do that. The clue is in the title. Predator. Predator. What do predators do? They hunt prey. What happens when they catch the prey? They kill the prey. When they kill the prey, what do they do next? They consume the prey for calories. You can't be an apex predator at the top of a food chain dominance hierarchy unless you hunt, kill, and eat the flesh of other animals that sit below you in the food chain. In other words, folks, it is unavoidable, inescapable, and a prerequisite that to be an apex predator, you have to kill other animals and eat them. You can't avoid it. If you don't do that, then you're not an apex predator. Folks, politicians, I want you to think of them like apex predators. Politicians find themselves not at the top of a food chain dominance hierarchy, they find themselves at the top of a political dominance hierarchy. And just like the apex predators, there are certain behaviors that are prerequisites. They are unavoidable. They are inescapable in order to be a politician at the top of a political dominance hierarchy. And do you know what those behaviors are? Lying, deception, stabbing people in the back, status seeking, power hungry. You need to be a status seeking, power hungry, backstabbing, lying, deceptive, truth omitting individual to find yourself at the top of a political dominance hierarchy. You do not get to the top of a political dominance hierarchy unless you engage in those behaviors. Just like the apex predator. Apex predators only find themselves as an apex predator at the top of the food chain dominance hierarchy because they hunt, kill, and eat other animals below them in the food chain. It is fundamental to the nature of an apex predator to do that. And in exactly the same way, folks, If you want to be a politician who climbs a political dominance hierarchy and finds themselves at the top of that dominance hierarchy as the leader of their party or the leader of the fucking country, you have to be status-seeking, power-hungry, lying, deceptive, and prone to the omission of the truth. You do not get to the top of a political dominance hierarchy being an honest, open, high-integrity, wholesome individual. That doesn't happen. The elk and the deer and the gazelle don't find themselves at the top of the food chain because they do not hunt and kill and eat other animals. They are the prey. And in exactly the same way, the politicians in their own political dominance hierarchy, they hunt, they kill, and they eat their competition alive. There is no other way to behave as a politician. You have to do it if you want to get to the top of the political dominance hierarchy and benefit from all the resources, all the access to opportunities, and all of the riches that are waiting for you up there. Folks, fuck me. The truth seekers, the high integrity people, do you find them in politics? Since when was the last time you saw a wholesome, high-integrity truth seeker at the top of a political dominance hierarchy? I ain't seen one. Ever. In my 31 years. Ever. Anyone that I've ever seen at the top of a political dominance hierarchy is power-hungry, status-seeking, a liar, a deceptive individual, and someone who routinely omits the truth so that they can continue to gain access to the resources that await them at the top of the dominance hierarchy. You see, if you don't do those things, guess what? You don't make your way up the political dominance hierarchy. Oh, and I'll throw in another one. Stabbing people in the back and throwing them under the bus. If you don't do all of those things, you don't become an apex predator in the political arena. You get outcompeted. You get thrown to the side. You'd be destroyed. The system will not allow you to climb the political dominance hierarchy if you are high integrity and a truth seeker. The only reason we see the type of people that we see in politics is because that is what those behaviors are what allow those people to climb the political dominance hierarchy. It's just like the apex predators, folks. You cannot call yourself an apex predator if you don't fucking hunt, kill, and eat animals, consume their flesh, and end their life. It is a prerequisite to be an apex predator that you kill and end the lives of other creatures. You have to do it. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself lower down in the food chain dominance hierarchy, likely to be preyed upon yourself. And so, folks, when we understand the parallels between apex predators and politicians in their respective dominance hierarchies, we can now bring in the lens of probability. If we accept that politicians are analogous to apex predators, insofar as there are certain behaviors that are unavoidable in order to be a politician at the top of a political dominance hierarchy, just like there are certain behaviors that are unavoidable in order to be an apex predator at the top of a food chain dominance hierarchy, then we understand that politicians, any of them that are at the top of political dominance hierarchies, are exactly like apex predators. And what are the universal traits of politicians that have ascended dominance hierarchies? status-seeking, power-hungry, liars, deceptive individuals, omitting the truth, stabbing people in the back, and throwing them onto the bus. So once we understand this, folks, now we can use the lens of probability. What is Nicola Sturgeon? What is she? What did I say about 20 minutes ago? Nicola Sturgeon isn't just an average run-of-the-mill politician. She has ascended not only the political dominance hierarchy of her party, the SNP, but she has ascended the political dominance hierarchy in Scotland to become the First Minister. So if we now have to use the lens of probability to decipher if Nicola Sturgeon is telling us the truth, that she was just an oblivious, honest, wholesome, high-integrity dipshit that was deceived and betrayed by her evil husband, Peter Murrell. If we apply the lens of probability, do we think that Nicola Sturgeon is telling us the truth in this tell-all BBC interview? I'm going to leave that up for you to decide. If you have followed the show thus far, and you actually understand the nature of the analogy between apex predators and politicians in their respective dominance hierarchies, then you should be able to come to a conclusion with respect to Nicola Sturgeon, her interview with the BBC, this entire situation with her husband, Peter Murrell, and you should be able to deduce, in terms of probabilities, folks, we might be wrong. We might be wrong. There's a possibility. There's a possibility that the conclusions that we come to might be wrong. But if we had to use the lens of probability, we would be able to look at Nicola Sturgeon for what she is. A politician who has lived at the top of a political dominance hierarchy for over a decade. Once we understand this, and once we understand that there are certain prerequisite behaviours that politicians must exhibit in order to find themselves at the top of a political dominance hierarchy, then when a scandal breaks like this, we are actually in a position to use the lens of probability to then say, well, you know what? If I'm staring at a dead deer, let's imagine, folks, I've got, I don't know. Let's say I live out in the Sundarbans in India. You know, one of those swamp marsh forests. Let's say I live out in the Sundarbans. And let's say I got myself a few deer. Let's say I've got 5 deer as my pets. And let's say I wake up one morning and I go out to check on my deer, to feed them. And I realise that one of them is missing. So I go out and look around the village, I head out into the forest, and I find the deer is lying there, dead, half eaten alive. Okay. Well, am I going to conclude? Let's say we have a list of suspects here. So let's say suspect number 1 is the fucking, I don't know, the wild cow that's in the forest. Let's say we've got suspect number 1, the wild cow. And the wild cow, I mean, is he guilty of the crime of killing and eating the deer? Let's say we've got suspect 2, which is a fully grown male tiger. You know, folks, if I'm presented with these 2 suspects, the wild cow and the fully grown male tiger, and I'm looking at my dead deer that's half eaten alive, and I had to guess, using the lens of probability, if I had to guess who is likely to have killed and eaten the deer. Now let's imagine the wild cow. In this fictional universe that I'm now living in, let's imagine the wild cow and the fully grown male tiger could talk in English. So let's imagine they could talk in English. And let's imagine the tagger said to me, "Oh, but Mr. Bandido, I have no responsibility for the death of your deer. You've got it wrong. No, I have no responsibility. I shouldn't have to bear the responsibility for the death of your deer. Nothing to do with me." So here I am, staring at this large, muscular, apex predator called a tagger. And I'm looking to my left and I see a wild cow. Now, was I there at the time of the attack? Did I see the attack happen? No, I didn't. I woke up the next morning. I noticed one of my deer was missing. I went out to look for it. I found it dead, eaten, non-responsive, as you would imagine. And so what do I have to do in a situation like this, folks? Well, I have to apply the lens of probability. I wasn't there. I don't actually have an eyewitness account of what happened. I don't have video footage of what happened. But here I am, listening to the tagger. The tagger is telling me that he didn't do it. It wasn't him. The tagger is going to try and convince me that no, he's not interested in eating deer. That's not his game. That's not up his street. And I'm looking at his big, enormous paws. I'm looking at his big canines. I can see some of his carnassials in his mouth as he speaks. I'm looking at the fucking size of him. And I'm aware that he's an apex predator who frequents this part of the forest. And then I look at the wild cow and I think to myself, yeah, lens of probability would tell me that it's very likely that the wild tagger has killed and eaten my deer. Now, I don't know. Could somebody else have been responsible for the crime? Maybe. But you know, if I had to hedge my bets, if I had to guess, the tagger being the apex predator in this part of the forest, who is responsible for patrolling, he owns this territory of the forest. It's his territory. I know he lives here. I know this is his land. He patrols it. I know he has a past history of hunting, killing and eating other animals. But you see, the tagger's telling me it's not responsible. It's telling me, no, it wasn't me. What other option do I have, folks, but to conclude that the apex predator is probability-wise most likely to have been responsible for killing my deer? I could be wrong. Maybe the deer broke out of the enclosure and maybe, I don't know, maybe a pack of maybe a leopard killed it. I don't know. Maybe some other creature, some other carnivore, some other pack animal in the forest. I don't know. Maybe there's some other reason. But I'll tell you what I do know. The male tagger that's trying to convince me that it wasn't him, I know that he patrols this territory. I know that this is his territory. So I know that it's less likely that a leopard or some other carnivore is going to enter into the territory of this tagger in order to compete for the tagger's resources. That's the whole point of the tagger having this territory that he calls his own and patrolling it. It's not that likely. It's far more likely that the male tagger who patrols this territory, who calls it his own, who is an apex predator, who hunts and eats deer for a living, it's most likely that it was him. Do I need to bring in the fucking CIA to work this out? Do I need to ring up the CIA or MI5 or whatever and say, excuse me folks, one of my deer died and I don't know who it was. I just don't know. I was chatting with the local tagger and the local tagger told me that it wasn't him. So I just don't know. Could you give me some guidance? Fuck me, folks. Nicola Sturgeon has ascended a political dominance hierarchy. She has found herself at the top of this dominance hierarchy. That's all I need to know to apply the lens of probability. Because once I apply the lens of probability, I know what is likely to be true. I may have missed a few bits and pieces, but I know what is likely to be true. Do I honestly think that Nicola Sturgeon, for 12 plus years, as leader of the SNP, as a responsible person for overseeing the accounts, as someone who chose to marry Peter Murrell, and I would have to assume knows him well and his tendencies well, and who also chose to work with him in the very party that she is leader of, and in the very party over whose accounts she has oversight, am I supposed to believe that she had no idea that this was happening? Is that what I'm supposed to believe? That she didn't know? Didn't even have an inkling? She didn't even have any suspicion at all when other members of the party started to draw to her attention. They didn't draw to her attention anything about her husband, Peter Murrell. They were simply drawing to her attention that something looks funny with the SNP accounts. Are you telling me that upon being tipped off with that information, she just thought, no, nothing funny there. Not worthy of an investigation, that. Am I supposed to believe that she had no idea that this was happening? As someone who climbed a political dominance hierarchy? I'm going to leave, folks, the conclusions in your hands, because I trust that you're capable of coming to a fairly well-informed decision about all of this using the lens of probability. Anyway, folks, that is our show. Nicola Sturgeon, we've tried to break her down, break her little interview down, break down this circumstance, break down this story. There's a lesson in this, folks. The lens of probability is a powerful tool. You can use it to save you time, and you can also allow yourself to recruit your logic, because that's what the lens of probability uses. It's using your logic. You just have to logically look at who's involved. Where do they sit? What's their position of power? Where do they sit within society? What do people who typically hold their positions do? How do they behave? We can start to bring in a whole bunch of information that allows us to have a very well-informed guess about what is likely to be true. But anyway, again, folks, I'm going to encourage you. Have we got anybody in the live chat? Nobody in the live chat. You know, if you agree or disagree, folks, let me know down in the comments section. Leave your insights and comments down there. What do you think, folks? Is Nicola a big, wholesome, high-integrity individual who has been just falsely, falsely accused? She has had the sword of the public's opinion. The sword of public disapproval put to her throat. Is this unjust? Is this unfair? Let me know down in the comments. And again, folks, if you like in general the nature of the show, if you found it interesting, give us a little thumbs up. Hit the like button. Hit the thumbs down button if you found it a waste of time. Of course, folks, we need to embrace the feedback when it comes in, every now and again. And then finally, folks, again, if you like in general what we do here at Bandido Talks, then feel free to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. We are live on Universal Bandido time. The Bandido does his live shows as and when he feels like it. So you're going to have to subscribe to get notified, folks. And we're also live over on Rumble as well. For those of you who don't know what Rumble is, it's basically like a YouTube competitor, you could say. The Bandido does live shows over on Rumble, but they're different live shows. We've almost got 40 live shows over on Rumble, completely different to the live shows we do here on YouTube. It's more political. I know this is a political show, you could say, but it's more political over on Rumble. We deal with more US-based stories. So if you want to find a whole bunch of live shows that you haven't seen yet, use the scrolling black banner below. It's over here. Over this direction. No, this. Let me see. That direction. You know, my monitor is flipped on my screen. So anytime I'm using my hands and I'm looking at the monitor, I don't know which direction I'm pointing. There it is here, though, on the scrolling black banner. Head over to Rumble, folks. Check out what we've got going on over there in terms of live shows. And then finally, feel free to head over to X. I was going to say subscribe over on X. Follow over on X. You can be notified over there as well, folks, when we have any live shows upcoming. Just to keep you in the loop. So look, subscribe here on YouTube. Subscribe over on Rumble. Follow over on X. That is everything from me. We have to call it Saturday evening now, folks, don't we? It's a Saturday evening now. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And, you know, we'll be back next week. We've got more live shows, a shit ton more content coming your direction. The content's just flowing, folks. The Bandido's in a groove with his content. Check out the channel, folks. We've got a whole bunch of different little segments, whether it's Bandido swings when he's out on the tennis court, swinging the racket, lessons in nature, mind streams. We've got Spanish-only episodes. You know, if you want to improve your Spanish and listen to the Bandido speaking in Spanish, again, Spanish musings. Check it out on the channel. But anyway, folks, that is everything from me this evening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And with all of that said, it is over and out. This week on YouTube, from the Bandido.